In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote peace and socio-economic development of multiculturally diverse world. As we give voice to the people, we also give your business a voice and make it heard. Get your products and services off the ground by advertising on our fast-growing platform. With so much of daily visits to New York Parrot, you can't afford to be invisible to prospective clients on the websites they trust the most. Our posts reach millions of people across the New York State and around the world. Advertising on our new site will unlock an audience of thousands of potential customers on your doorstep. New York Parrot is born to prosperously speak tomorrow for the voiceless.
Good morning and welcome to the Foreign Policy Review, a Parrot TV program. I am Dustin Pickering, and today we have co-hosts Carlo Parcelli and Billy Bob with special guest Dust James. He's a frequent watcher of this program, a frequent viewer, and today's subject will be conspiracies, how the MAGA crowd has overturned the left narratives, and basically a bit about the elections that just happened. So we'll let Dust James introduce himself for the beginning of the program here, and tell us a little bit about where you're coming from, who you are.
Right on. Y'all hear me?
Yes.
All right, right on. I'm Dust James, the Marxist-Leninist truck driver. Come to you from rural North Carolina. I'm the chair of the Working Class Revolt Media Collective and Study Group. I also host a blog of Anti-Imperialist America. Full-time truck driver, strong anti-imperialist, Marxist-Leninist. I'm a huge fan of the show. And we're glad to have Billy Bob, help and support our work. We support his work in the Working Class Revolt Media Collective.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Billy.
Thanks, Dustin, for agreeing to come on. Really nice of you. I appreciate your work. You do great work with all the things you just mentioned. Today there's a lot to discuss, as always. We're kind of foreign policy focused usually on this show, but we did just have the midterm elections. We're in a chat group, a Facebook chat group, and you linked to this 11-minute video, and I even forget the gentleman who was doing the video, but they discussed kind of how the Republicans are outflanking the Democrats from the left on a lot of issues. And this is a very, what's that word? Complicated. Like, it's a very complicated topic, and it's easy for people to get confused and fall into certain, false perceptions and things like that. But I thought that video did a good job of kind of explaining things. And I thought that might be a good topic of conversation today, as well as we can get into other foreign policy issues. But broadly speaking, can you just maybe put your perspective, your opinion of the whole Trump phenomenon and how, the Republicans are kind of taking the left talking points away from the Democrats and maybe using those to confuse some people into supporting them, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. Like, I'm just trying to present the topic, and I want you to kind of frame it how you want to frame it.
Right on. Yeah. The video that you're talking about was from the great American folk singer brother David Rovix.
Rovik,
and he does great songs praising St. Patrick's Battalion, the coal miners, Battle of Blair Mountain. He got a good thing on that, and he kind of vibes with me on this positive socialism thing and about how the true strategy about combating fascism, it isn't backing the liberals whose policies is helping to create the horrible conditions where fascism breeds. And it's not like these MAGA-com reactionary alt-reds who are tailing these fake anti-establishment Republicans. It's class struggle. It's going to workers who may be, leaning towards reactionary policies and saying, you're in the same boat as the black and Mexican worker beside you. And we got to fight against the monopoly capitalist for workers' rights and workers' power to improve these conditions. Now, on the specific issue about that, you can't really talk about it too much without talking about the failures of the left in Western countries, which is it's really weak because, we had the height of the labor aristocracy in 1968. And then if conditions have gotten worse, instead of workers turning to socialism, they've been turning to people like Reagan and, some more reactionary forces. And we're coming up now in my lifetime. I'm a millennial. I've seen 2 economic crashes. 3 if you count the dot-com bubble in 2000, but largely 2008, and now with COVID. And more people than ever, especially young people, are looking into socialism. And if we look what is available, you now have this so-called democratic socialist camp with Bernie Sanders and all. It's good. I'm glad people are getting involved in it. And I think the conditions were right for socialism. Did Bernie Sanders jump in front of that and kind of twist it into the Democratic Party? Is he acting as a sheepdog imperialist? I would say so. But, at the same time, we do need universal health care. We do need free education. We do need student debt relief. But these people, they never get these things. And then they tell us to back the Democratic Party, and now they're out here supporting the Nazis in Ukraine. So, and then let's look at who I call the right sheepdogs, the fake anti-establishment, the MTGs, the Tucker Carlsons. Now these people are outright openly racist. Just gonna say it. Make America great again is a racist slogan. You can see it in the 2020 election, where the vast majority of people, more people than ever, voted for Biden. That ain't an endorsement of the Democrats. That's just how openly racist Trump was. So you got these 2 sheepdog forces. You got these reactionary people who actually are left of the sheepdog imperial Democrats, when it comes to like Ukraine and stuff. And then, so you got these 2 forces that are essentially funneling people back into the imperialist duopoly. And we really do need to rebuild. And my position is we need to rebuild a time where we actually had power as workers, which was the 1930s and 40s Communist Party. And they didn't do it by lining up behind the Democrats. Back when they supported Roosevelt, and some of the best reforms in America were passed, Social Security, etc. We had a Communist Party that was hundreds of thousands of members strong and led labor unions. The communists led the labor movement with millions of members. We need to rebuild working class power, and that's grassroots, uphill organizing with a lot of obstacles. And we can't, allow either the sheepdog Republicans or Democrats are huge obstacles in that way. I think the people, the working class, white, black, rasa alike, are generally anti-establishment in general. But then you have, these people claiming to be socialist on the left which are often more imperialist, or at least come off more imperialist than these outright reactionaries, and with racist rhetoric. So it's confusing. You've got MTG up here saying, "Oh, stop supporting the fascists, Ukrainians. We need birth formula. We need milk and formula for working class Americans," and that's absolutely right. But then she's also like, "We need a full out trade war with China now," and all these racist tropes and the trope of the welfare queen and all this, And I'm in the Black Belt South. I mean, North Carolina is one of the more whiter states in the Black Belt South. But you can look at, there's a string of counties. If you look at William Z. Foster, one of the greatest people in the Communist Party, he ran in 1932 on full rights for Negroes throughout the United States and self-determination for the Black Belt South. And the Black Belt South is a string of counties going down from Mississippi to Georgia, all the way up through the South up into Virginia. And if you look at that map and the vote against Trump, it almost perfectly lined up. And, the outrage against Trump is still out there. We saw that in the recent elections. And the midterm election, it was supposed to be this big red wave. And it really was just a red ripple. So it really shows that these reactionary MAGA Republicans aren't doing as well as they thought they would. And the reason is, they're still, people are still pretty mad and pretty much hate Trump. And I'm hoping it gets put on it really is an obstacle. I'm hoping it gets put on the dung bed of history, like the waste bin of history, the MAGAism, this stuff. I really don't like it. But at the same time, we can't trust, the sheepdogs. We need to get back to, grassroots, each one teach one, revolutionary education, militant community and labor organizing. And that's a tough uphill battle. And it's but it's the only way forward. I said a lot there, y'all.
No, it's fine. Right ahead. Well, it was interesting. I think one thing that conservatives, mainstream, I'm talking moderate conservatives, have in common with a lot of leftists is they don't like the government in their business so much. And they like to just, sit with their family, have dinner. I mean, that's working class in America for you. And I know Carl's going to disagree with me. I think most people are generally pretty nice people. And there's this strain of racist assumption going through America. I don't think it's the mainstream so much. I think that it was kind of hijacked and brought to the mainstream by the Trump phenomenon. I mean, we do have a lot of hate crimes and so forth, but I don't think most people fall in line with that. I think a lot of those people that supported Trump liked his anti-establishment appeal, and I liked the fact that he wasn't bringing us into other wars and things like that. There were some positive aspects to the Make America Great Again phenomena that were really part of the American consciousness that he took and he made his own. And so I think that got a lot of support, but then people started to see the ruse in the long run. That's my opinion of that.
Well, I'm no fan of Elizabeth Warren, but she did get the people we're talking about that like to have their dinner around the table with the family and all. She did get them billions of dollars back from the grifters on Wall Street. Mm-hmm. And who put an end to that? Donald Trump. So I think it's a matter of people not being informed, which brings us to the whole notion of the way they flipped the narrative of the left. Because back in the day, I was considered a conspiracy theorist because of the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. I was 16 years old. I was sitting on the floor watching TV with my father, and this incident came up, and I turned to my father. I said, "This is bullshit," because my father was a barber, and we cut hair. He cut hair to make extra money by going to the Navy Yard on Sundays and cutting hair with my mother's cousin Manuel. And they would cut the Navy people's hair. So I got to see what a Maddox destroyer looked like up close because they were dry docked there. That thing is 400 feet long. So how is two little North Vietnamese dinghies gonna take on this huge ship? Maybe they were just on a suicide mission and they had, munitions on the little dinghies. Even that probably wouldn't do much damage. But it all seemed hokey to me. But when I brought that up in my history class with Mr. Manuel, which ironically named Mr. Manuel, he thought I was crazy. So I said, look, I'm not going to support Johnson because it was a civics class, so you had to pick the election. I'm not going to support Johnson because I know what Johnson is going to do, and I probably instinctively knew that he was involved in the Kennedy assassination. He's going to give the military-industrial complex. I didn't know that term back then, but the equivalent of it. He's going to give them everything they want. He's going to increase the amount of American servicemen going into Vietnam exponentially, which he did, of course. So I've been at this for a long time. Iran-Contra, the Church and Pike committees, all this stuff. Every inch of the way, I'm a conspiracy theorist. So what Bannon has done, Steve Bannon, is he's taken this notion of conspiracies and he's realized that you don't have to have any facts. You don't have to be like the people I grew up around who filed FOIA request after FOIA request after FOIA request and documentation. And the Christic Institute that had 1,000 boxes of evidence and took it down to Florida for their case. And this shill, this guy that was taking bribes, this Judge Lawrence King, blew their whole case out of the water in 20 minutes, faced with 1,000 boxes of evidence. It took him 20 minutes to blow the whole case out of the water, and that was the end of it. So basically, when I was coming up, it was this huge, and it's still there. It's still there in Democratic and Republican forum. In the forums you're talking that Dust was talking about, the traditional lying foreign wars, imperialist bullshit tradition is still there, but now Bannon has figured out a way to do it without any real context. I mean, they do create context, but they all turn out to be false. I mean, no matter how you want to look at the justice system in this country, if you have 60 court cases on whether or not Trump, these notions that Trump in one way or another was deprived of votes that go against Trump, well, you have to. A logical mind would say you have to go, well, there's probably nothing to what I'm thinking, and there's nothing behind it. But exactly the opposite is occurring. And that, to me, seems to be a very dangerous conundrum. It's something that Bannon has tapped into in the American psyche. You can say all you want about how the people are fundamentally against what's happening to them, but that certainly isn't the way they're ultimately acting and ultimately voting, actually, because if you vote at all, it's generally a vote for one or two of these kind of corrupted entities. So yeah. Just to sum up briefly, and my daughter's a labor lawyer, and we were at one of her parties, and I was talking to one of her partners, and I said, Joe, why do people constantly vote against their own self-interest? That's the thing that puzzles me so much. And he's been doing it for 40 years. He said, I don't know. He had no answer. So that's what's intrigued me. I think it probably has a lot to do with propaganda. I mean, from Ivy League on.
Solidarity maybe too.
Yeah. So anyway, I've said too much here. Go ahead.
At work, for some reason, they didn't block the stream to Bannon's War Room. So I was watching Bannon's War Room during the election night, and he started off so excited. And then by the end of the night, he wasn't as excited anymore. I guess things didn't quite go how he had hoped. But, I think they do a very good job of, targeting these two groups and dividing, the working class, dividing society into these two groups, the red group and the blue group. And, they just give them each a whole narrative, like a whole vast narrative for them to embrace. and that just results in a division. But both entities, like you said, are owned by the same capitalist class, and we're not really given a choice. Ultimately, both parties are going to pursue the interests of capitalism. And so I don't see, for instance, with the Ukraine issue, with the big geopolitical shifts that are taking place, the question is, would a Republican victory make a difference? Would that put an end to the war in Ukraine? Are they going to cut off funding? I mean, certain people were saying, hey, that's what we're going to do, but not enough of them. And I don't believe that. They always find a way to continue, furthering the interests of the ruling class establishment. But it seems like the Democrats are the ones really, really after Russia. And then the Republicans really want China. And so I think if the Democrats were successfully able to take out Russia, you'd see a big swing. And all of a sudden the media would be pro-Republican. They get all the Republicans in place, and then they go after China. And that's just it's stage managed. That's how it would work. So it's not real democracy. But how do you break this news to the masses when all the platforms of mass communication are not telling them that? It's the struggle. It's why it's called a struggle. It's not easy. There's so many obstacles, like Dust was saying, but it's our task, really. I mean, to get through and share reality with the working class, and develop a class unity. That's our struggle, and it's not easy.
Anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, I could get further into the Trump phenomenon. I say this, I'm from a rural community in North Carolina. I think 60% of voters, even though it was the red ripple, and I voted Green Party for Senate. I was happy to, just try to get a little bit of independent out there, in this red state. But there's a lot of Trump people that voted Trump around me. And, I do think that, Trump himself, is racist to the core. He came out and started his campaign on, and I also have there's a lot of immigrants from Mexico in here. I was partly raised by Mexican immigrants. And he came out on, all Mexicans are rapists and criminals and marginalizing and attacking.
Just the illegals, just the illegals.
Uh-huh.
Only,
no.
only the ones that cross.
That's not how I took it. That's not how I took it, man.
But that's not even true, right? I mean, just because they come across the border doesn't make them all rapists or drug dealers.
That's what Trump said. It was really racist. I mean, I was partly raised alongside Mexican immigrants who were some of the most hardworking and super exploited. The way people are treated in tobacco fields in North Carolina and the chicken factories, and the people that I worked alongside, you got this racist, like, rich favorite spokes slogan is "You're fired." Reality, fake, failed dude. I mean, it was bad. It was horrible. Now, it's interesting that they took a poll back when Trump was running, and actually that component was actually one of the most unpopular components. His very racist, anti-immigrant component was actually one of the more unpopular components of his platform. And I do think I can echo Dustin and Carlo here that I think in this situation, people voted for Biden against Trump's racism and Trump's classism and all kinds of problems with ability issues, sexism, you name it. They really did do that. But what they did was people voted for Biden against Trump. And the people who voted for Trump were voting against Hillary Clinton and NAFTA and sending our jobs overseas and the worsening conditions. And, I was at a bar up in Massachusetts one time, and, I was, my public persona, even though I'm really critical of the Bernie folks, is, I support Bernie because that's the more socially acceptable. I'm not going to say I'm a radical communist in Massachusetts where most people are Republicans, but there was this Trump supporter guy that I got along with, And I was like, I support Bernie. He supported Trump. And he's like, I like you. You're against the establishment. You're against Clinton. You know, that was like left. It wasn't really left right wing unity. It was just basically, you know, working people are tired of the current system. They don't have a communist party or a socialist party, you know, to guide that. But there's a general feeling that the system is not working for working people, and we got to do something about it. And I think Trump's job as controlled opposition from the Democratic Party. I mean, Hillary Clinton supported Trump's primary campaign, and this has been a documented instance of the Democrats funding these so-called anti-establishment far-right figures because they think they're going to win against them. And if they don't win against them and they do win, now they got an enemy. So now instead of blaming it, you know, we're mad at the Democrats for shipping our jobs, you know, overseas with these crazy trade deals, or the Democrats supporting these horrible wars, or the Democrats owning these cities, controlling these city political machines, and there's more homelessness. I mean, and there's worse problems. When we come to confront them against that, they can say, hey, it's either us or these horrible, you know, right-wing racist bigots. Do you want us or them? You know, so who are they going to blame? You know, so I think both the Democrats, if you look at, you know, Kamala Harris, Biden was the architect of the crime bill, increased the new Jim Crow. So the Democrats are also racist. And not only are they racist, they're actively building the infrastructure that maintains national oppression, which is the super exploitation of black and brown people done through the so-called the so-called justice system. I call it the injustice system. You know, Kamala Harris was the enforcer of new Jim Crow, you know, as a brutal prosecutor in her state. And then, so it's like these two forces, both the Democrats building up the police state and the outright, you know, racist rhetoric and the trope of the welfare queen and all this stuff coming from the right, are both simultaneously building the police state and building the ground for fascism in the United States simultaneously. And I think the only way we can really go against that is we need to unite and fight and bring out a real class appeal message. You know, the immigrant worker who beside you, the black worker beside you, is being screwed over just like you. And these are the monopoly capitalists we got to bring it to.
I think very soon we might have, you know, a global war on our hands that we can, you know, we can use to unite the working class. I mean, you know, against. I really think that it seems clearer and clearer every day that what's going on in Ukraine is just the beginning. They have plans for a global conventional war against Russia and China, probably Iran, maybe Venezuela. Like, I think in the very near future, you know, that'll be the primary thing that we're going to be discussing. And we need to tell everybody, this isn't our war. Like, it's a war of choice of the capitalist class. And they are, you know, they're going to sacrifice us working class in their wars to, you know, maintain their sphere of global wealth and power. And I think that'll be a very, hopefully, easy and attractive. It's the same kind of thing that Lenin was able to use in Russia, you know, to unite the working class there. And I think it won't be too long before we'll have a similar kind of appeal we'll be able to make. I don't know. Do you guys think that this is gonna, you know, Ukraine is just the beginning and it's gonna mushroom into something bigger? Carlo,
Did we take a break?
Yeah, we need to take a break.
And then I'll answer
Foreign policy review, and we'll talk about this a little more in depth. Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely convince you. Welcome back to the Foreign Policy Review. We have Dust James, the special guest, with Billy Bob and Carlo Parcelli, co-host, and I'm Dustin Pickering. We're discussing MAGA Republicans and conspiracies and so forth, and the elections that just happened and are still going on. So, what was our question? Let's restart. Let's reboot here with the previous question we ended with before the break.
Well, Carlo was going to give us his thoughts on whether or not Ukraine is just the beginning of a much larger conventional global war.
I think it's a continuation of a large global war. I think it's been going on since the end of World War II. I think it really has much more connection with what's called the deep state. I'm always amused when I'm kibitzing with people, especially of the Breitbart flavor, who go, "Oh, you're using the term deep state." Well, I go, "Yeah, it came out of the Turkish government back in the '60s, and it was made popular by our good friend of the show, Peter Dale Scott, in many of his books. I mean, it's not something that Bannon came up with. It's something, once again, that he stole. So I think that this comes back to an analysis of the nature of the propaganda. Now, we can say we can make all the jokes we want about JFK being Trump's running mate in the next election, all that stuff. But the fact of the matter is that there has been far more tremendous propaganda abuses on the other side. They're not as comical, and we're not shocked by the fact that they're so ridiculous yet so accepted by people, because when the deep state does their propaganda, they do a much more thorough job of it. Take the Steele dossier. I mean, Aaron Mate has tirelessly gone and dug out all the refutations about the Steele dossier imaginable. Yet I still run into, I can't go to dinner parties. I can't go to holiday dinners or anything with family, because I sit there and I go, Jesus Christ, where do I begin? Where do I begin? And so there is that. So let's analyze the difference between the Bannon propaganda, which is just empty. I mean, it's Lindell and the My Pillow guy. I mean, the whole notion that he would have any insight into any of these things is so ludicrous that it should be everybody should be laughing. Everybody should be on the floor. It's comical like that. So you have that dimension, but then you have the dimension on the other side, the deep state dimension, the Edward Bernays dimension, the Paul Leinebarger dimension, the Edward Lansdale dimension, that dimension, which the Lansdale had his hand deep into foreign politics in Vietnam and Cuba, and Admiral Lemnitzer and all of these people who spent their lives spreading this kind of propaganda, not only in other countries, but they also, there was a domestic dimension that was carefully honed. So people have been just bombarded with these lies for decades and decades. So you have that dimension, the old deep state dimension, and you have the Bannon dimension, and you have what I would call our dimension, which is the Noam Chomsky and the Izzy Stones and all the hard work they did. And Izzy Stone, they asked him, how did you come up with the hidden history of the Korean War? It's so brilliant. You were so prescient. He goes, I just read government documents. That's all he said. I just read government documents. It's right there. Chomsky said essentially the same thing, but that gets no traction. It gets none. Now, part of that has to do with the nature of media. The wealthy people buy the media. The lie gets perpetuated, and even people of Michael Parenti, and Noam Chomsky and Izzy Stone, you couldn't get better people more honest people than that. More, and they get ridiculed. I'll just leave it at this. My wife and I were watching a TV show a rare TV show where Noam Chomsky was one of 4 commentators, and he went into this long digression about Central America out of his book Necessary Illusions, and a CEO from one of the major networks, you know what his answer to Chomsky's long, detailed, hard-won explanation of the situation in Central America and El Salvador specifically was? Baloney. One word, baloney. He had nothing. Baloney.
That was his rebuttal.
I don't know where to go from there. Anybody want to pick it up?
Well, I did not hear an answer to my question, sir, but that's okay. So, you know, last night I was doing a bunch of reading, you know, the Greenville Post, antiwar.com, Information Clearinghouse, and they all were having articles. A lot of them referenced the Stratcom commander, I forget his name, but essentially suggesting that, you know, what we're seeing in Ukraine is only the beginning. The big ones coming. There was a quote from him, essentially, you know, suggesting that, you know, the war is going to get much wider. And so that's what I was wondering if anybody has any thoughts. Like, I mean, for me, it was kind of, I was just thinking, you know, what is it going to be like in 2 or 3 years when, you know, perhaps there's a draft, perhaps there's U.S., you know, people involved with in active fighting in you know, against Russia, against China, against Iran. Who knows? Like, is that something the American public is going to be able to be propagandized into supporting, or are we going to be able to make a difference? Or are they going to just really clamp down on the censorship, because we know that they're able to censor us and they can cut us off if they want to. So those were the thoughts I was having. But, you know, we're not there yet. There's, you know, U.S. service people dying are there's pretty, you know, it's not a full an all-out conventional war yet. But there's definitely a lot of speculation that that's where we're headed.
Hey, I think I can kind of pull these two themes in together and give you some of my personal experience. I mean, I was in high school, you know, the height of the anti-war. At the height of the Bush era, you know, 2004 invasion of Iraq. I was a freshman up to just before the election of Obama in 2008. I did counter recruitment in my military town, high school, against the military at 17 years old. You know, my first political work was a joint internship with the American Friends Service Committee. They called it Truth in Recruitment. I called it counter recruitment to the military, you know, and I think I can kind of get into this. And, you know, even just back then, the brother talked about, you know, all the way back in the 60s and some of the great lefties exposing, you know, the actual real conspiracies that the U.S. government and the intelligence agencies and state has done and gone through, you know. And I saw like it was mostly lefties and just the start of, you know, the kind of libertarians were like, you know, 9/11 was an inside job. I don't know if I can say that here. And I could say at the very least, you know, it's pretty well documented, even scratching the surface with Fahrenheit, Michael Moore's more socially acceptable Fahrenheit 9/11, is they at least knew about it. You know, they at the very least knew about it. There's a bunch of questions to be answered, but that was usually the left that was blamed for having conspiracy theories, you know, against the right-wing president. And then when we saw in the Obama era, I was, you know, very anti-war. This is when I actually, you know, I was in my hometown. I wasn't really, you know, rural. I was a Southern boy in a small town. I did my counter recruitment, but I didn't really get involved in the anti-war movement until the Obama era. And, you know, great figures like Cindy Sheehan, which I've interviewed for my show, you know, were leading the charge during the Obama era. But I mean, it became like all them Democrats who were with us, you know, against Bush, they all disappeared. Yeah. And it was only like the hard left, you know, people, Cindy Sheehan is now a comrade now, you know, that were really there. It has been communists leading the anti-war movement for a long time. And, you know, and it was kind of us that had that, you know, labeled conspiracy minded, for a long time. And we saw under the Obama regime, when we saw an escalation of the wars, and there was like this media campaign to keep all left anti-war voices out of the media. And we were basically bashed over the head with, if you don't support the first black president, you're an evil racist. At the same time, there was reactionary stuff against him. So it was almost like this move where the left, anti-establishment sentiments were suppressed. They allowed more of the right-wing anti-establishments to be mixed in with this anti-Obama racism. And you look at Trump, what was his major political action back then? Saying how Obama, where's your birth certificate? This is an American citizen from Hawaii. This is outright, this is more racism from Trump. So they kind of like branded, all of this anti-establishment stuff by allowing the right wing to have this upper hand. They were able to brand it as reactionary, when it was us on the left. I consider myself a proud leftist, meaning I support historical progress. I consider myself carrying on the legacy of those who were against the royalty in the French Revolution. And now I'm a worker against the capitalists. And now I support, working class taking over. That's why I'm a leftist. So they kind of built this. And then when we saw coming in with the Trump administration, we saw even further of this, starting with, they didn't call it conspiracy. It was just all over the mainstream. With Russiagate was a horrible, stupid, unproven conspiracy. The establishment conspiracy of Russiagate. And I was actually involved with some of the anti-Trump demonstrations. I went up to see my friends up in Greensboro who are affiliated with the, I ain't going to talk too bad about them, but the RCP was kind of on the front lines of some of this anti-Trump rallies. And they have done good work with anti-police brutality up in Greensboro. So I went up to one of their demonstrations, and I was very disappointed with what I saw there. What I saw outwardly anti-Russian. This was supposed to be a rally organized by communists. And I saw them promoting xenophobia towards Russia and like calling Putin a dog. And this is an anti-imperialist country that allies with Venezuela and allies with Iran against the imperialist United States. And these so-called communists, that's the Revolutionary Communist Party. I don't want to promote them. Like, I have major issues with them, and I'm getting into them now. But basically, they were organizing a thing where they were openly inviting in anti-Russian sentiments, and they were pushing the Democrat impeachment against Trump. And why was Trump impeached? Trump was impeached because he did not give weapons and aid to the neo-Nazis in Ukraine fast enough. And that's what the Democrats were doing. But I got something else I got to say to some of your guests on here, some of your watchers on here is saying, oh, Trump didn't say that. He's really not that bad. Trump is horrible. He's an imperialist. He's a racist. You don't need to be supporting that cat. Even though he was impeached for not giving weapons to the Ukrainian Nazis fast enough, he ended up increasing the funding against for the Ukrainian Nazis. As soon as he was pushed, he said, oh, you need Ukrainian Nazis? I'm in a political jam here. They're coming, they're impeaching me. Y'all need some Nazis, y'all need some weapons. He sent more to them. Trump is not our friend. Trump kept, he put more sanctions on Russia. He murdered the general in Iran, an ally of Russia. These fake anti-establishment figures, MTG, Tucker Carlson, they're full of hot air. And the second, just as we saw the Bernie people cave, the second, they're talked a big game, we're going to agitate and stir up the system. And now they're the main people backing the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. they're going to cave just as fast. I'm saying don't get your illusions in this controlled opposition that's been given our mantle of questioning the system to poison it. You know, we need to start reclaiming this. And I think to be able to get that, we're going to need independent infrastructure like this show, like my show, working class based media organizations that can look into hard data and evidence that the government is putting out themselves and think this thing from a rational level and put out information directly to the people from media organizations that are from our communities themselves. I know I said a lot there. Y'all can go ahead and respond to it.
Well, I know. Sorry, Carlo. Both, both things about Trump can be true. Like he can be a worthless, good-for-nothing racist, which he is, and the establishment could be making up lies about him to subvert him. And so a lot of times when I point out that Russiagate was a hoax, Ukrainegate was a hoax, people accuse me of being a Trump supporter. And it's like, okay, I mean, just because I support truth, and it's tough. It's just a world full of different narratives, and everybody has their own perspective. And unfortunately, the mass propaganda apparatus, the platforms of mass communication are owned by the billionaires, and they really leverage and exploit those platforms to mess with people's minds. So I agree. Like it's going to be small grassroots people like us that can hopefully make a difference and giving people a better understanding of the lies that they're hearing from the mainstream media, the establishment press. Carlo, I hope you were going to say something.
Oh, I just wanted to add that that the deep state, as traditionally known, it's so obvious that people have to get beyond one thing, and that is that the corporations, the billionaires that control the media, are also heavily infiltrated by the and I don't even want to use the infiltrated, but in bed with the intelligence community. And Covert Action Information Bulletin, which has been around since 1976, for example. Well, Lou Wolf's magazine essentially founded it. They've had so many articles over the years, including right now, about how many people are really trolling any kind of anti-Russian, anti-U.S. stance on Russia. Statements or propaganda, almost no matter how innocent they are, there's some way of dampening their influence. And you can, but you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, you can go back to the church and Pike committees, to a certain extent, the Rockefeller Commission, because during the church committees and before they assassinated Frank Church, let's be honest about it, before they killed him, it was revealed that at the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos' current organ, that 100 individuals working at the Post at that time, and there were only 630 some employees, I think, including the printers, 100 of them had connections to the Central Intelligence Agency. Either they were out-and-out agents or they were assets. That came out in the Church Committee report and the Pike Committee reports. There was that kind of influence. So if you have to, in one sense, it's like I tell people, my short answer for people is, what are you, 4 years old? These people have set up these lies. This lie machine. It's been around forever, and they're lying to you, and they're getting you to do things that you normally wouldn't do. And so when you get to this Billy Bob's question, I think all they had to do was flip the narrative on Iraq 2. Flip the narrative. Now, I mean, I know it's not the U.S. invading Ukraine. It's Russia invading Ukraine. And it takes a little more subtlety to see how the Maidan coup and the Minsk Accords and all these were manipulated by the U.S. and the British to goad Russia into attacking Ukraine, to make it, I feel like, a really necessary move to do. an existential move on their part. To it's maybe a little subtle for people, but I got to say that's why I've come to conclusion on this show a number of times. Americans are idiots. They're stupid people. They're stupid people. And when you want to talk about 911, don't feel bad about Dust, because no one less than Christopher Black on our show supports your position on 911. And that man carries some weight with me. So I just want to say that
it might get this show deplatformed from YouTube. I'm not sure how that works. I know you can be very careful questioning election integrity or questioning 9/11. Those are the kind of things they justify.
When Mr. Black did it, we got away with it.
That's true. You wanted to talk about Kherson before the show, Carlo. I know, that's the big news kind of in Ukraine. Everybody's discussing the tactical withdrawal from the city of Kherson, and there's a lot of speculation about, what that means and how that's going to play out. Did you have any insightful commentary to share? Any opinions?
Well, me or Dust?
Anybody. I'm sorry. Dustin, Carlo.
Yeah. I do.
Okay.
I'm going to just lay out my conspiracy theory. What's his face? The National Security Advisor.
Sullivan.
Jake Sullivan. He went and he met with the Ukrainians. He also met with the Russians last week or the week before that. My theory is he basically told the Russians, look, we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. We blew up the Kerch Bridge. We're capable of blowing up the Kakova Dam. And if we blow up the Kakova Dam, that's going to cause flooding that will make it impossible for your troops to retreat. They will, in the ones around Kherson City in the eastern part of the western part of Ukraine, and it will also kill untold numbers of civilians. And we've got the propaganda machine to lay that shit on you, and so that might have some influence on the moves by the Russian military to consider pulling out of Kherson, even though my understanding is they brought a great amount of material into that region, because once the Russians move to the eastern part of the Dnieper River, they'll almost be untouchable. Now there will be problems, like I discussed earlier. They can reach the water supply in Crimea, and they can also reach a number of major targets in Crimea, including Sevastopol. So that's something to consider. But that's my 2 cents. Otherwise, I don't really understand. I don't really understand the pullout, because all we've been hearing for months and months and months is how every incursion by the Ukrainians has really basically almost everyone has been turned back by the Russians. That's all I had to say on it.
Yeah, I mean, the Western media certainly had a lot of justification to be pumping their fists recently. With what happened in the eastern part with the offensive in Kharkov and now in Kherson, the Western media is definitely able to exploit that for maximum propaganda benefit, which they're doing. There's good commentary by people like Brian Berletic and Scott Ritter, and they kind of give a different perspective. But if you're not hearing those, you definitely would think that, wow, Russia's just getting demolished and this is great. Freedom, Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. But, and that gets us back to, how the media just does a disservice, and isn't concerned with truth. They're all about, furthering the interests of the ownership class. So it's definitely an obstacle that we have to overcome and struggle against. Dust, we're monopolizing all the time here. Is there anything that you have on your mind you'd like to discuss?
Yeah. No, I think I started to answer your question earlier, but I didn't fully answer it. But I might have to get in some background about my position before I'm able to do so. And I am a militant anti-imperialist. I'm also a worker in the South, and usually don't think about militant anti-imperialists from working class people, white workers in the South. And there's a reason why I take on that position. And that position is the same monopoly capitalists, these same few banking and oil cartels that Lenin talked about as monopoly capitalists, are the same ones that are putting opioids in our communities, that are destroying our American communities, are the same ones that are mass murdering Iraqis and Afghans and fighting a proxy war against Russia. So I see Russia fighting against my same enemy. When they have a coup, when these monopolies in the government they control back Nazis, and they have a coup and put basically a proxy U.S. military base right on the border of Russia to fight against them. Why are they doing that? Back in the 90s, Putin wanted to join NATO. Well, they didn't let him be a part of it. And, they said, oh, you ain't going to be in the imperialist club. So what's Putin going to do? Nationalize the oil and gas and then reinvest in Russia and then become allies with the oppressed nations. Just as we're getting fucked here in the South and workers and oppressed people across this country, they're super exploiting our brothers and sisters in Venezuela, in Bolivia, in Iran, in Syria. And you know what Russia has done in this last period when they were told they couldn't be in the imperialist club? They sent troops down to Syria to fight against the U.S.-backed terrorists in Syria. The Russians stabilized Venezuelan oil. If you look at a picture of the Venezuelan government, it's poor black and brown and indigenous people. The way they pepper sprayed black people marching to the polls in North Carolina. They're trying to take away our democracy here. They're trying to take away any semblance of democracy. We ain't got no democracy. I'm anti-establishment too, but they actually got democracy down in Venezuela that the people fought for. And the Democrats, Republicans, Trump sent his little Bay of Piglets down there to destroy the Venezuelan people's democracy. And black fishermen stood up and fought against that, but Russia and Putin were allying with the Venezuelans. And I see Putin and Russia as an ally, and that's why I got this Russian flag behind me in this period where everyone likes to say, oh, Trump is a friend of Russia. He ain't. Trump is a friend of the American working class and the oppressed nations. Not Trump, fucking Putin. Putin is a friend of the American worker, and Putin is a friend of the working class and oppressed nations all around the world by standing up against the same enemy we face here. And that's why I supported the special operation to take out those forces that were hurting the Russian people and hurting the Ukrainian people. One of my favorite episodes I've done so far, and now I'm getting in to answer your question, I've had a long way around it, is I had the pleasure of interviewing recently on my channel, Anti-Imperialist America. I interviewed two people at the same time, two sisters and comrades, Cindy Sheehan and a Ukrainian national who lives in the United States named Slava. And what Billy Bob was describing with the mass death from the military engagement is already happening. She described that in her country, in Ukraine. It's already happening. They've been building up Nazism and hate against Russian people, calling the Russian people orcs, and mass murdering ethnic Russians in the Donbass region. 1,000 mass murdered by this U.S. imposed regime. Now, after this war broke out, you know, the ones they trained up to be Nazis and hate Russia, they'd all signed up to go over there and fight Russia. And then after that, they ran out of people, and they had a draft, and those people went and died. Now they're on their second round of drafts, pushing the Ukrainian people an imposed Nazi regime, well, Nazi-controlled regime. I don't want to get into the specific, you know, Zelensky's Jewish, but if you still look at the Nazis that are embedded in the state, if we're looking at the Lenin definition, the state is the armed bodies. And that's why you have a Jewish president giving war medals to Nazis, because those armed bodies still control that country. I believe the description that fits the proxy military, U.S. military base, is a Nazi-controlled government in Ukraine. But if you look at the testimony from someone who has family in Ukraine, Sister Slava, Comrade Slava, on my interview, she's worried about her dad and brother being recruited in a war that they know they're going to die in. And even the Ukrainians who've been exposed to Nazi propaganda for years to hate the Russians are seeing their fathers and their sons go off and be drafted and forced to die in this insane war that doesn't benefit them at all, because, you know, when they had a neutral president, it wasn't a Russian pawn. When the Ukrainian people had a neutral president, the Russians are not imperialists. The Russians treated the Ukrainians with respect and had mutually beneficial trade deals with Ukraine. And ever since the coup, we've had this monopoly, capitalist, imperialist, exploitative economic deals with the West that has destroyed the Ukrainian economy. And what we're seeing there, what you described, Billy Bob, is already happening in Ukraine. And to an extent, if you look at, I think I want to talk, one of your guests mentioned Tulsi Gabbard. And Tulsi Gabbard's an interesting figure. And I think I'm not a big, I'm going to be honest, I'm an old school lefty. I'm a militant anti-imperialist. I did counter recruitment. Tulsi Gabbard is a part of the military establishment. Now, she's an anti-war part of the military establishment. And that's why it's an interesting figure, because we look at people like Scott Ritter, who was also a part of the military establishment, who I believe is gone in 180. He's on our side now. I can't say the same for Tulsi, unfortunately. But we're starting to see this development. And there was even better flashes. If you look at the anarchist at Fort Hood back in the 2000s, 10s, there was revolt in the military with military veteran anarchists, you know, trying to stop buses from going to Iraq. We got Tulsi Gabbard. We got Scott Ritter. And there's a section within the military that's looking, it's like, why is the military backing terrorists? We're supposed to be against the terrorists. And I think, you know, that's a section that we can work with, or at least use their points to show, you know, some of the more extremities and confusing stuff that this deep state military state, which is the arm of these monopoly capitalists, are doing. I mean, that's my 2 cents. I know I put in a lot there. We're coming up on.
Dust, thank you so much for yes, your analysis. We really appreciate you coming on, and that is exactly why we invited you, just to hear those great that great truth. So I know we have a hard close after an hour, and I think Dustin is going to wrap us up here.
Absolutely. So thank you, Dust, for being on the show today, and thanks, Billy Bob and Carlo Parcelli, for being co-hosts and co-discussers with these issues in the world. You've been watching the Foreign Policy Review, and I'm Dustin Pickering, a Parrot TV program. If you like this program, subscribe to our channel and watch other programs. We have the Politics on Friday, and we have many other programs, Financial Focus University, and of course we have World Inkers Network, which I also host that program, and that's if you're into creativity and you know, poetry, literature, music, the arts in general. Get on to them to watch that show every Saturday and Tuesday at Tuesdays at 2 p.m. and on Saturday at 10 a.m. And thanks for watching the show. Please subscribe to the channel and share our content if you enjoyed this discussion. And always be welcome to leave comments. We would love to hear from you. So thank you so much for watching the show, and have an excellent day. Go out and do some reading, some research.
In a world where the quality of information available to poorer communities is doctored, tainted, and sometimes regressive, where the words fake news have come to mean other people's opinions, it is vital to rely on news platforms with journalists who have feet on the ground and can report the truth. New York Parrot, a New York-based national and global news outlet, is changing the narratives of media operations. We focus on the news that matters, like self-empowerment, entrepreneurship, finances, health, security, politics, and more. We strive to curb violence, racial and economic discrimination, and to promote peace and socio-economic development of multiculturally diverse world. As we give voice to the people, we also give your business a voice and make it heard. Get your product and services off the ground by advertising on our fast-growing platform. With so much of daily visits to New York Parrot, you can't afford to be invisible to prospective clients on the websites they trust the most. Our posts reach millions of people across the New York State and around the world. Advertising on our news site will unlock an audience of thousands of potential customers on your doorstep. New York Parrot,